Dave the Rave, roving the rock and beyond, talking to his wee sister Mo. And the reason he's talking to his wee sister Mo is because she's just cycled from Land's End to John O'Groats, and she's done that solo at the age of 55 with all her camping gear on her bicycle to celebrate taking voluntary redundancy from her job. So effectively she hasn't got a job now, she's got no responsibilities at all, and what she did straight away was to take advantage and take a couple of days and cycle, get trains down to the bottom of the country and then cycled all the way back up to the top. And the reason I'm talking to Mo today is because she finished it, so there you go. Well done, Mo, that's the first thing. Well done, you did it.
Hey, I know. I'm very happy. Not some kind of sudden realisation or anything like that at the end of the trip, but I'm absolutely delighted that I actually managed to do it, that I didn't find it desperately difficult, which was very nice.
Yeah.
And actually really the kind of feeling at the end of the whole thing was that I felt like I just had been on a lovely holiday. That's what I was saying. Yeah. It didn't feel, I think to other people it maybe feels more like what a big achievement. I'm really glad I did what I set out to do, but it's not like, oh my gosh, this has transformed my life. It's more, I'm glad I did it. I've had a lovely, lovely time. Fantastic.
Yeah, and the thing is, the reason it doesn't feel like you've done the biggest thing is because your fitness has been up to it. You were in good condition before you started, but also you had the hills at Cornwall, but then it levelled out, didn't it? And until you got really mostly to the Highlands or something, that was the hardest. And you had the strength to get up over everything, even with the 17 kilos of camping stuff on your bicycle. As long as you had the fitness, you were going to be all right, and you did have it. Plus,
yeah, you're right. The hardest bit was definitely Cornwall, and I honestly think if you were going the opposite way from John O'Groats down, you would still find that the hardest bit was Cornwall and Devon, just because of how hilly it was, and it was like steep. So it's fine to climb a hill if it's quite shallow and long, but it's not so easy to climb a hill if you're really having to push and work at it to try and get up the hill. So I would still say I think if you came down the way, you would find the Cornwall and Devon the hardest part. But the other bit, which is interesting, right, going through Scotland, right, everybody said, oh my God, it's going to be so hard. It wasn't that was quite easy. There were lots of relatively flat days, right? No day in Scotland had as many climb feet as Cornwall and Devon. Yeah. Not one bit. But when you got to the very top and you're travelling along the north coast to get to John O'Groats, that was the hilliest part of Scotland, which you wouldn't really think that would be. You would think it was going to be going up Drumochter Pass or something, getting through the mountains. It wasn't that. Because you're kind of in a valley between the mountains, that bit wasn't so hard. It was the coast, up, down, up, down, up, down. Yeah. That would be the hardest bit of Scotland. But that was my second last day, so obviously the fitness was good enough to cope with that fine.
Yeah, so that's good. So to summarise, you started on Sunday the 23rd of April, and it took you exactly a month because you finished on Tuesday 23rd of May. And that was, they go 1 month. And so I'll just summarise what you did since we spoke to you last, which was day 19. So we did a video. So we've had, this is our third video. Day 20, you went from Lesmahago to Glasgow. You met a fed-up jogger, somebody who was doing that same cycle but wasn't enjoying it, surprisingly. And you stayed at Niall's house, which...
Yeah, they were in a rush.
Eh?
Yeah, it's interesting that it really helped me that as well. I mean, I think I'd already said to you I was just taking it slow and taking it easy, but meeting that guy who was doing the same as me, but all he wanted was to have it out the way and have it done. And that he was disappointed when people overtook him and it kind of stressed him a bit. Not the right attitude. No. It's a shame. It's a shame that that's the way for him. Not everybody's got the time that I had. Not everybody has a month of work in order to enjoy themselves and take their time. But yeah, it was very interesting to meet him, how different his perspective of it was from me.
Or in fact, a month off or 9 months off or lifetime off, depending on how that works out. But we'll come back to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's at least a month. It's at least a month. We'll say that. So that was that day. Day 21, Glasgow to Barlick, an easy day. You stayed at your own boat because you live in a fat boy barge boat and you had a barbecue with pals.
Yeah, right. So that day, right, was quite funny in a way because I'd stayed over at Niall's house in Glasgow, but while I was away, I got somebody living on the boat, and the toilet tank in the boat had filled. So while I was down in Liverpool, in fact, the girl who was living on the boat said, Harriet, right, said to me, the toilet tank's full. I said, no problem, Niall can move the boat, that's fine. So that was all, but this was going to be the first time ever for Niall to move the boat on his own.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so that responsibility of doing it, right? So anyway, it turned out that day, which we booked for him to move the boat, was the day that I was cycling from Glasgow to Ballach.
Oh,
so
right.
I didn't want to interfere, because it was his first time, I didn't want to interfere with that. So I cycled from Glasgow to Bowling. I had a cup of tea so I could waste time with one of my my boater pals, Niven. Sat until it was time for Niall to arrive to move the boat, and then I cycled on to Ballach. I was still going to be too early coming back, so I then cycled back from Ballach to the boat in order to take more time to allow Niall the time to move the boat on his own and park it up, which he did beautifully.
Yes, he didn't crash it. That's me. He didn't crash the boat, and so everything was fine.
He didn't crash it.
Yeah.
He is a bit of a crasher, or he has been in the past, but did beautifully.
No, and then it's a big boat. It's, what was it, 80 foot long or something like that? Your house.
60 foot. So when you're at the back of that, it's a lot of boat ahead of you, especially when you're manoeuvring round. It can be quite difficult.
Yeah. Okay. Day 22 from Ballach to Aberfoyle, which was your most scenic day, and you stayed at Niall's again, your partners. You had done 960 miles at this time. Describe the scenery at that time.
Oh, just beautiful. So actually, from Ballach through to Calendar, definitely, and beyond, actually probably up to Pitlochry almost, was the most scenic part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Those 3 days. So if anybody wants to say, I'm going to do a 3-day cycle, start at Ballach and do 3 days from there.
Okay.
Just amazing. What was amazing, and I think, I know most people, I'm sure, are the same, bringing in water to the scenery always transforms things, whether it be a river or a lake or whatever. So when you go from Ballach onwards, it is Locher Lake one after the other kind of thing. And the bit I remember particularly that day was cycling along by a loch called Loch Venacher, and the path's lovely. It's meandering. It's not too much. Some of the Sustran routes now that they do, when you put in a new Sustran cycle path, it's got to be so wide. Okay, it's actually as wide as a road. So it's got to be so wide, and of course it's new tarmac and all that kind of thing. And that's lovely to cycle on, but like as in from the point of view of the bike's wheels turning, but it's not so pretty. Whereas this path along by the Loch Venacher it's been there for a long, long time. It's meandering and it's beautiful looking onto the loch. The scenery in Scotland is beautiful. So it was those days, Ballach to all the way to Calendar, and actually even on to Killin, would be definitely take them as a mini cycle if you fancy trying something.
Okay, so at that point you've cycled up 53,000 feet, which is twice up Everest, roughly speaking, from sea level. So that's, half of 100,000 feet. That's not bad. And then we're on to day 24. We went from Calendar to Loch Tay, and that's where you camped and you saw your first red squirrel. There you go.
A big beefy red squirrel as well. He was quite a dark brown. He was kind of the same size as a grey squirrel, which quite often when you see the red squirrels they're really quite small and a wee bit scrawny looking, So that was quite nice. I guess he or she was a bit of maybe a crossbreed between the two, but was still very red. I'm guessing just because of the size. But yeah, that was lovely. And Loch Tay, that was one of my favourite night camping. Again, it was by the water, and it was by Loch Tay, obviously. I'd also where I was, it was like a kind of I think it was like a kind of sports area. They had these lovely little huts with thatched roofs, like about maybe 20 of them that people obviously rented. So I went past all of them right down to the loch and kind of tucked myself away, behind some trees. So I was quite near people, but I wasn't visible. But I was safe, kind of thing, that kind of thing. So, and it was just beautiful. It was just that was a lovely, lovely night's camping. But also, I think as well that next day, I didn't have an awful lot of miles to do, so it was very relaxed. It was just all very, just go to bed, wake up. I think I had about 8 hours sleep that night, which is probably about the most I ever had. And the next day was. Am I right thinking that was to Pitlochry?
Yep, Lochty to Pitlochry, day 25, stayed at Sandra's house.
Yeah, so that was only about 35 miles, right? Which, I used to cycle that to go to work every day and back. So, that's not a big cycle. So it was just again, a lovely day, beautiful scenery, lots of water, and took my time. So I didn't get moving till about 11:30 that day, I think. And then I stopped and had lunch, and I stopped and had a cuppa, and I stopped, and it was just very relaxed and very lovely. And Sandra that night in Pitlochry was fantastic. She fed me, she put me up in her bedroom. It's a sister of a friend. And it was a fab day, that one, actually. And the weather was nice as well, of course. That helps.
Okay. And then day 26 was Pitlochry to Kingoosey. I don't know if you say it's Kingoosey. And you went
Kingoosey,
up from Topter Pass, which was the highest point in the Sustrans route, and it was colder, and you stayed at a friend's.
Yeah, that suddenly became noticeably colder, and from then on, it got colder and colder as I went up. I didn't really expect that, actually. I was getting a bit worried that I didn't have enough clothes with me. So that was the day that Ben cycled with me, my older boy, and the first about 7 or 8 miles again was quite scenic, so that was good that he had a bit of that. And then it was just cycling along by the 8, 9, and it was. I mean, the scenery is nice, but you're cycling along by a very busy road. We weren't on the road this time. It wasn't like a cycle lane on the road. It was a cycle path beside the road, so that was good. It wasn't attached to the road at all. So it was the safety element was fine, but it was so noisy, Dave, that you actually couldn't talk sometimes because you couldn't hear each other because of the traffic. Okay. So that's not ideal. And it's interesting, right? Where you think when you get to Scotland, it's going to be stunning, right? And of course, the bit up to Pitlochry was lovely, but then after that, actually, some of it wasn't so good because of where the track was, because they don't have much of a choice. There's only one way they can really take you that way, and that's beside the already existing road. Yeah. That road's there for a reason, so you can't, you're not up down mountains, So we ended up, going up the Dromocta Pass, and it just, it was lovely to have Ben there because it was company, and it was a bit distracting from the fact that you're just cycling along by an extremely busy road.
Okay,
but
day 27 at Kingoosey, or however you said that, to Inverness, and you stayed at Christine's, and then
so Christine and I were at school together, so that was quite a long day, actually. I was getting quite tired. I think actually what happened was because the bits as I was going through Glasgow and I was getting picked up and I didn't have the bags and so on, these were very easy days. And then obviously once I got beyond Aberfoyle with that calendar, that was it. I was on with all the luggage again, etc. So and I was upping miles maybe a bit as well. So I started finding I was getting quite tired again. And when I got to Inverness, I have to say, I think I'd only done about 60 miles that day, but I was ready to stop, that's for sure. That was quite a tiring day, that one.
Okay, so day 28 was Inverness, and then to the Kyle of Sutherland, where you camped at the river near Bonar Bridge.
That was a lovely place to stop as well. But I think I said I had a little bit of a problem the next morning there. That was the one and only time where somebody was not happy with where I camped. But where I did camp was lovely. So it was right in a river. I had gone in an open gate to a field which had kind of relatively short grass in it. So I'd walked around the edge of the field because not to go across. I walked right around the edge, and there had been along the river. There was a bit that looked as if it was quite well tended. So I thought, okay, I think that could be somebody's garden, but there was no houses on that side of the road, so you can't tell. The bit that I chose to stop at it wasn't tended. It was just kind of down onto the river. Right. So the field, and then trees, and then this down onto the river. So I chose to stop there, and that was a lovely night. Again, very peaceful. I set up my tent that night. I was so lucky. I set up my tent. I thought, oh, there's a few wee raindrops. I'll just take the bags off the bike just to make sure I'm okay. And I swear, within about 60 seconds, it was a torrential downpour. So that night I was in my tent. That night I was in my tent from 7 o'clock. That was it. There was no point going out and standing in the rain and getting wet, So, but yeah. So the next morning, a lady. Well, no. Actually, what happened first? Actually, the next morning, a drone came over and was there. Clearly, there was nothing else to look at apart from me. No. So it was sitting in the sky looking at me.
No.
And I thought, all right, maybe they're, I don't know. So, and then about 5 minutes later, less maybe, this lady on a wee kind of 4x4, a quad bike thing, came zooming down into the field, down to where I was. Were you camping here last night? This is my land. This is private land, right? And I was like, oh, right, okay, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was your land. It's difficult to tell that. But I'm just packing up. You can see I was packing up. Just packing up. I won't be long. I'll be about 15 minutes. She huffed and puffed and went away. And then the drone's still there. So I'm packing up. And actually I thought, this is annoying me that I suspect she's flying this drone to keep an eye on what I'm doing. So actually I have to admit, I deliberately made another cup of coffee in my wee stove because I thought, I'm just going to take my time here and pack it up sensibly. I'm not going to rush. I'm not, So I did that, but I did make the extra cup of coffee just to annoy her a wee bit, I think, to be honest. And then everything was away. I was just putting the tent into the bag, and she came in back to that back with a padlock to padlock the gate with me in the field. So I went up to say, look, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. I didn't know this was your private land. And actually then she started talking to me, and I explained to her that what I was doing for charity, blah, 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 and her attitude changed. And she was perfectly pleasant and, didn't lock me in, let's just put it that way. But yeah, that is where you're actually legally allowed to camp that, in that occasion. It was the only time in the whole trip where I actually had a problem.
Yeah, funnily enough, even though you've got the right to roam. And locking me in wouldn't have presented a problem for me. But then again, your attitude was slightly possibly more patient than mine would have been with the lock. So well done to you. I'm not bothered boring you with what I would have done, but it would have been a bit more decisive. So well done to you though. Right. 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 So.
Listen, I was going to get another donor for the MS Society.
Right, so we're day 29, right? Kyle of Sutherland, you went to the north coast. They hit the very north coast of Scotland at the sea, and that's Loch Craggy. And you saw a golden eagle. You went to the Crask Inn, the most remote British pub in Britain, and you saw a unicyclist that cycled the length of Britain 19 days. That's your summary.
Yeah. So that day I cycled Tongue, which is right in the top of Scotland, and I stayed at a friend's house, and the house was amazing. It was like a 3-bedroom house, and there was nobody there apart from me. So that was extremely lovely. Beautiful views out over the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And the gentleman that let me in, who was kind of looking after the house, was the first ever person to ride a unicycle from Land's End to York Roads. And he did it in 19 days. I don't think he's the fastest ever in anything, but he was the first person to be recorded to do that. So that was quite nice to compare notes with him. And I actually was saying, for example, his unicycle, nowadays if you have a unicycle, it's got gears, but his unicycle didn't have gears. And of course, if you're going downhill, you have to keep pedalling down the hill as well as up the hill, because you're fixed. So you can imagine that would be tough going.
Well, that was of course the reason for the penny farthing in the 1900s, late 1900s, because it had the big wheel because it meant that you could go much further at the turn of a pedal because the crank of the pedal was on the big wheel. So that's how you had this massive wheel. There weren't any gears. So it was the fastest bicycle of its time because you had the biggest wheel meant you could go woo and really speed. It was the Ferrari of bicycles when it was made. I was reading about that. There you go. Anyway, so day 30.
There was something about the guy that actually did the Land's End to John O'Groats on a penny farthing, and I think he did it in 18 something. He held the speed record for that for 110 years or something.
Right.
So a long time. Nobody else, well, I guess they weren't making penny farthings probably anymore either, but he held the speed record for the penny farthing for over 100 years.
They were fast bicycles. They were fast until the gears came. They were the fastest. And so then we got to day 30. Loch Craggy to Thurso, which was you stayed at a camp, the campsite, which was luxury, and you went along the North Coast 500 route, and you were like with other motorhomes and other people and things. It was busier up there because people were going around the North Coast 500s.
It was. So actually, Brian, the unicyclist, had said to me, this could be your toughest day. And it wasn't, but it was. I'm glad he warned me because it was surprisingly hilly. So what I'd done to kind of counteract that, I deliberately set off really early. So I think I was on the road for, I can't remember, early doors anyway, so that you can just take your time. If you take your time, you can do almost anything. You can go so much further, but if you push yourself and try and go fast and all that, it exhausts you. So if you go slow, I mean that's the thing to do. What is it? The tortoise and the hare. Yeah. Be the tortoise. The tortoise will get there. Yeah. The hare might exhaust themselves. If they're super fit, they might not. But I am not that person. I am the tortoise. I'm proud to be so. Yeah. So I tortoised my way between Tongue and Thurso. It was quite a big. I think it was over 60 miles that day. So I knew that was going to be. With it being hilly, might be a wee bit tougher. But yeah, no, it was fine, absolutely fine. Of course, the fact that I was going to be in a campsite, my friends were there. That's a big high at the end of the day, so I had that to look forward to.
And that brings us on to day 31, which was Tuesday, the 23rd of May. And you only your last day, and you only had 12 miles to do. So how did that day go?
Oh, brilliantly. So the nice thing about that is my friends Elizabeth and Jerry, who came up to kind of see me over the line. They're not early risers, so the deal was we'll just get up whenever we get up. And I said to them, I'm happy to arrive at John O'Groats at lunchtime. It doesn't have to be at 9 o'clock in the morning. I only had like 12 miles to go. Yeah. So and sorry, Dave. Also, for the first time ever, I was staying in the same place 2 nights in a row. Yeah. So I didn't have my bath, I didn't have my tent, I didn't have to set the tent down, nothing. So that was very pleasant. So actually, I think when we set off, I set off and I said to them, look, I'm not going to rush, I'm just going to go at a pace, so don't be thinking I'll be there super quickly. But because I had no bags, and I was super fresh because we didn't leave till about 11. I got there in jig time and actually kind of got there a bit too quickly for them. So they had a banner, balloons and everything, and they were still in the car getting it when I pulled into John O'Groats. But all very nice. They had Prosecco, and just really lovely. I was so glad that they were doing that. I thought when people are saying, oh, we're going to come, like actually Niall said he was going to, and another friend said, my friend Angela, she said she was going to come up all the way up on Tuesday to get me and then take me down, but whilst working, and it's a 5.5 hour drive from Glasgow to John O'Groats, right? So good on her, but anyway, you feel too guilty for that. You're like, no, you can't do that, but my couple, my friend Elizabeth and Jerry, they've got a camper van and they were, they're still up there. Yeah. So they're still having a good time and everything. So that was great. The guilt thing wasn't, and I didn't really think it would make that much of a difference having somebody there to kind of celebrate with, but it was so lovely.
Yeah, good.
And we had lunch and went to pub, and we had a lovely, lovely night that night. It was just really nice,
So
great.
Did it mean anything actually getting to the sign where it said that you'd finished? Did it mean anything, or you already knew that you were going to do it? So it was just the conclusion of it. Was it?
Yeah, I'd say probably the overriding feeling was excitement. It was like, yay! You know, that kind of, but that's it. Not a kind of big meaningful thing, but just really chuffed that I'd done it. Yeah, that's what I would say. Really chuffed that I got to the end, you know.
Well, there's the thing.
I had considered cycling back then to Glasgow, but actually, the closer you get, it's like one of these things, you know, the closer you get to the end, the more that idea is less appealing.
Yeah, because it's not a challenge anymore. So it's not. That's right. You've already done it. You're just going back. And by the way, in running races, or actually just dog walking, even dogs, nobody likes going out and back. The worst running races, it's got to be a circle. Everybody will go the same circle hundreds of times happily, but they won't go out and back. There's something about it. Going back over the same ground is horrible.
I know.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
So that's about it. So the thing is, in a way, there wasn't a massive amount of relief, because that's one of my questions here. You never really doubted very much you were going to do it once you got into a routine, did you?
Yeah, you're right. It was interesting when all the donations started coming in. I actually got worried, because I thought, if I do this now, I'm letting all these people down that have donated a bit from kind of, all right, well, we'll see how it goes and hopefully I'll manage. Suddenly there's this kind of, this really actually matters now, you know. So that I was worried about that more than anything. And once I got through Cornwall, really, as you said, once I kind of got established a pattern, once I got through Cornwall, which I knew was the toughest part, I knew that it would be fine.
Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, did you have any punctures or near misses?
No, my bike performed amazingly well. I had no punctures at all. Nothing broke. I did get my bike serviced when I came through bowling, so that helped obviously. So that's about 2/3 of the way through, and my gears were redone, and my brake pads were replaced. So that probably helped. And obviously I did have a brand new bicycle, and that I'm sure helped. I have a feeling if I do a big cycle in the future and my bike's not brand new, it may be more prone to problems, you know. So no punctures at all. I do use these tyres called Marathon Plus, and they're just phenomenal. So if anybody's thinking about buying new tyres for a bicycle, buy Marathon Plus tyres. They are amazing. With regard to near misses, we talked about the white van man the last time. So the white van men continued to cause me some frights. I would say probably 6 or 7 times vans came far too close to me. Like, as in, they're travelling 30 or 40 miles an hour and they're a foot away from my bike, from my leg. That's too close. If I was to give somebody advice about, and myself included here, because I don't do this, I haven't been doing this. If you want to overtake a bike, just pretend it's a car.
Yeah, that's right.
Just go in the other lane. There's times when I was travelling along and 2 empty lanes. Obviously nothing's coming the other way, and the car still was far too close to me, or the van normally. Just go in the other lane. You've got that other lane that it's not being utilised by a car coming the other way. Just go right over. And that is what I will try and do, is completely give a bicycle a car space, because if you're going quite quickly, obviously it's affecting the rider in that way, from the point of view of the air disturbance, as well as the fact that they might get a fright.
My boss overtook a cyclist recently, and he actually does give them the full lane. So he went right into the other lane, and the cyclist fell sideways, hit a pothole and fell sideways towards him as he overtook the cyclist. And the only reason he didn't run over the cyclist's head, which he only missed by a foot, even though he gave it the full lane, was because he'd given it the full lane and it was still close. If he'd given it anything else, I actually had to go back and just check he hadn't touched the cyclist, and he was fully in the other lane, and it was still a near thing. And so that's the proof of the pudding. He would have killed the person if he'd done any less. That's a good example. So yes, that's it. What advice would you give to anyone else? The best advice you can think of for anything you do different, or anything that's just a handy tip for anybody who wants to do what you're doing.
Anybody that wants to do what, Dave? Just do the same kind of thing?
Yeah, if there's a handy tip or something they might not know, or any advice, something that they might find handy to think about, like waterproof's your best friend or something like that, you know.
Okay. The handiest thing I would say, and I know I don't want to kind of repeat myself here, but the handiest thing I would say is take your time.
Right.
You want to enjoy it, right? When you're doing a cycle, the holiday is the cycle.
Yeah, that's right.
That is the holiday. So you can't enjoy the journey, you're not going to enjoy the holiday. So that's the key thing, is you need to be able to actually enjoy the cycling.
Yeah.
So obviously preparation is a big part of that. But other than that, take it easy and don't stress yourself with time limits. Just decide that you are going to cycle. If you can do this, you're going to cycle, and especially if you're wild camping, you can just stop. If you are booking accommodation, be kind to yourself and just bring your mileage down.
Yeah.
You're not pushing.
Yeah.
I met another lead jogger, so I started meeting quite a lot of them when I got up to the north of Scotland. There was a guy coming down the way on a skateboard, but he had given himself 50 days to do it, John O'Groats down, because he was turning 50 days later, right? So skateboard, that's going to be tough. But I met this older chap, and he was doing up the same direction as I was. I met him about 4 or 5 times. His name was Colin. And there was one of the days, it was chicken out rain, so the two of us sat and had talked for an hour, which you wouldn't necessarily normally do. And he was taking his time, and he felt exactly the same as I did. You just allow yourself the enjoyment of the cycle. And he, actually, it was interesting, we both felt the same. What we hadn't anticipated was that we wouldn't do very many touristy things, and that really the day was the cycle. That was it. That's what you did. You didn't. If you were lucky, there was something that you could maybe park the bike and walk around, but you wouldn't go and visit somewhere where you would kind of leave your bike and all your stuff behind. So the holiday was the cycling, and actually an awful lot of the day. Sorry, that's a change word past. An awful lot of the day was cycling.
Yeah, so you got to enjoy it.
So expect that. So you've got to enjoy that part, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, what did you miss the most and the least when you were away?
Okay. What did I miss the most? I didn't really miss anything. Genuinely, I wasn't kind of thinking, oh, I really missed this and I really missed that. Obviously, I had electronic devices with me, so it's not as if you're ever going to get bored as such, right? So I didn't miss anything, but I have to admit, when I got back home, there's always that lovely feeling of being home. That's great. And my bed, oh my God, it was so nice. So last night was my first night in my bed, and it's just wonderful. It's good to be in your own bed. It's your familiar place that you've got it exactly the way you want it to be, you know. So that was that. I didn't miss it, but now that I have it back, I'm just like, oh, so wonderful.
Yeah, you didn't miss it. You didn't miss it because you were having a wonderful time. But as far as the bed goes, it's like getting rocked to sleep in a boat, isn't it? Though, is it like a wee bit like being in a cradle or something?
Well, in a canal, you don't get an awful lot of movement. You would only get that on a really windy day, which I quite like. I think there's also an element on when I'm living on the boat, you don't really notice so much now because I've been here for so many years. People sometimes come on and go, oh, it's moving, and I'm like, I didn't notice. But there isn't. We're very protected here, so there isn't an awful lot of movement on a canal boat, to be honest.
Okay. So, in the end, it's not the hardest thing you've ever done, but it's probably the most memorable thing. It's taken a month out of your life, and it's challenged you, even just in the point of view of being on your own, being independent and being kind of strong and independent. So, it's got to be very memorable at least.
Yeah, definitely memorable. And you're right. There's a kind of underlying confidence thing that has, I'm not lacking in confidence as a person, but as you get older, maybe you push yourself to do different things so much. So I have particularly the wild camping element that's a bit scary and very much unknown, doing it on my own. So I'm really glad I did that from a challenge point of view as well, where I challenged myself in that way, and I did it and I enjoyed it, and I didn't feel terrified or scared or To be honest with you, though, right, I didn't really have a hard time. Nothing terrible happened to me. I lost a few things, but other than that, the bike didn't break. I didn't fall off. There was no major disasters when I was doing it. So, apart from the physical challenge and the camping, actually that was the only challenges.
Yeah. So, has it made you a different person in any way? Would you say a bit more confident?
But, well, again, the thing that I would say that I would take from it the most is to try and not to let myself be pressured all the time.
Yeah.
I feel as if the clock is the enemy, and we all push ourselves to do this by this time or get this done. We've got to keep going and doing and actually, why are we doing that? Why don't we just slow down a wee bit and actually enjoy life rather than always being pushed by time? Even things like yesterday, a friend wanted to see me for lunch. But what time shall I come? I said, I'll tell you what to do. Do your morning, you've got things to do, and just give me a shout when you're on your way.
Yeah.
That's fine for me. We don't have to meet at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock for lunch. We can just work it out.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to take from this. As much as possible, just chill down a bit of time.
Yeah. Good.
Don't be kind of like, it's easy to get stressed because you're like, I've got this idea that I want to be doing this by 11 o'clock. And then if you're not doing it by 11 o'clock, you stress yourself. Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Does it matter, So, sometimes it matters, right? Obviously, we're all, there's work and stuff like that. But it's an awful lot in life, I think, that we end up pushing ourselves along because the clock is showing a certain time. And we maybe just don't need to do that.
The very last video I did actually just, was it yesterday, the day before, I just stood on White Bay Beach with the sunset and the tide was out. And there was nothing happening, but on the beach I could hear all the birds in the trees, away over at the trees, and you could just hear the sea and you could see the sunset. It was just so relaxing, and that was the point I made. In fact, that was the last sentence I said. Remember to do nothing. Just remember to try and do nothing. Take it easy, take the time to do nothing, or at least appreciate what you're doing and where you are. And it's hard to do when you're working hard, but it's something that you've got to kind of learn, I think, to relax.
I think we all, I often have to-do lists as well, and my partner now says to me, your to-do list will never end. When you've taken some things off it, some other things go on it, right? It's a never-ending to-do list, right? And that's so true. Yeah. You push. Why are we doing that? Just slow down a bit, as you said. Take times where you're not maybe doing things.
Yeah.
You're not pushing yourself all the time.
Yeah. But
that was a big thing, right? This is probably something that I hadn't anticipated was going to happen in the cycle. So I had a vast amount of time. Okay, so you've got a lot of time to think, but actually what you've got is a lot of time to not even think.
Yeah.
I didn't have to think about anything. Right now, when was the last time I had that? Probably a child.
Yeah.
As a child, I had time to think. And that was lovely, right? So it reminded me, it kind of took me back into childhood. And the other thing that happened was lots of people, because people were donating and so on, I tried to, and I'm sorry if I haven't, I've missed anyone out, thank you, okay, but I tried to directly contact each person to say thank you for a donation. So if my friends from school became aware that I was donating, what I was doing, and they donated, I emailed them or I texted them or whatever to say thanks a lot. So of course, communication starts happening with many people from my primary school, my secondary school, that I haven't been in contact with. So that in combination with this kind of feeling that you've reverted back to maybe teen years or whatever, childhood, because of all this time that you've got, was quite odd. It was kind of like going back a few, like 3 or 4 decades in time, which I hadn't expected. It felt a bit like that, kind of like that same, I remember this feeling from my childhood,
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's the nice thing. In a way, it is like being a child, though, because you don't have any responsibility. And you and I have had many years of having responsibility for mortgages and kids and all the things that other people have. And life runs away, and so this is your first time, of not having any. So in actual fact, it is your first time really to have the chance to be like a child, because they don't have any responsibility either, And so that's something to hold on to, actually, in a way, if you can.
Just responsible for yourself, really. That's it. Yeah.
Be irresponsible.
Yeah.
Irresponsible.
Yeah. Worth doing if you can.
Yeah. Okay. So How many sunny or rainy days would you say? Because I think you had a lot of good weather on that month. That's what I
I
think.
think I did very well. Yeah, but you know, it's interesting as well. Yeah, living in a boat, a day with a little bit of rain is still a good day. So, and it was the same in the cycle. So, 31 days, I have to admit, I had 3 days of heavy rain.
Yeah.
And it wasn't all day, each of those wasn't all day, but 3 days where I got truly sodden. Other than that, I couldn't tell you how many days there was light rain. A lot, quite a lot of those days. Okay, I would say probably there weren't that many days where there wasn't some rain.
Yeah.
But it was light, and you know, you cycle. It rains, it dries, you dry. You know, it's not enough to get you wet. It's not enough to get down the collar and in your, you know, that kind of thing. You know, so it's perfectly pleasant. Those days are perfectly fine. You cycle in that, it almost makes no difference.
Yeah.
As long as you put on the correct gear, it doesn't matter. 3 wet days. Let's say the remaining 28 days, probably I would say at least 20 were raining at some point, and maybe more of them. And then yeah, some dry days, kind of thing, totally dry days. I was quite lucky, I think, from the point of view of when I was packing up my tent in the morning. Most mornings it wasn't raining then, so it maybe rained later on in the day. But so I kind of got everything away without getting soaked first thing, you know. So that was great.
Okay.
It's easier to deal with the rain when you're on the bike almost than if you're not on the bike, because otherwise you just got to get in the tent.
Right. The weather was pretty good. Your plan was to go from Land's End to John O'Groats because the wind is, and I've read about this, meant to be prevailing more from the pushing you up from the south than from the north. So it's more in your favour. Did it work out that way?
It did work that way. I mean, some days it wasn't perfect, but you know, any days of real serious wind, it was fortunately in my favour. And what was wonderful, right at the top of Scotland, when I got up there, the wind changed direction and it just blew from the west, not even from the south, just from the west. So as I wanted to go along the top of Scotland directly east, it just blew me. And I mean, I was flying. I honestly felt sometimes I'm hardly pedalling and I'm going at 20 miles an hour.
Yeah.
You know, it's just wonderful. It makes you feel as if everything in your bike is working beautifully. And of course, those days are the days I didn't have my luggage either, right? So I'm light, the wind's blasting behind me because it was really, really windy up at the top. You know, that kind of like, is my tent going to be okay tonight type windy, you know, like really windy. Fortunately, if you saw in the pictures, I've put a low profile tent, so it's not going to be quite so much, you know, it's not going to have so many problems with wind. But yeah, it was really windy up there. I think it still is quite windy. I'm back down home, it's not nearly as windy, but I think it still is quite windy up there. Yeah, it just worked beautifully in my favour. It was fantastic. So yeah, it was definitely the right decision. I think had I gone the other way, I would have found that journey a lot harder.
And that was windy in your favour when it was hilly as well, so that was lucky. Yeah.
That was the wind in my favour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the hilly bit. And the tent, by the way, when you're mentioning the tent, it never let you down. It didn't let water in at all, did it? All the way through.
No.
Yeah.
Now, what I did, you have this option, I think I said to you last time, that you can get this thing called a footprint, and it's like a bit of plastic that you sit your tent on, and it goes in between the two layers, right? And it cost about 70 quid. I made my own, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I got this big kind of thick bit of plastic, cut it out to size. I've got me kind of attachments onto it so I could pin it on the ground. So I always pinned it first, okay? Right. So that this footprint goes on first on the ground, easy to put down. Then my tent, which has got elastics on it, each elastic in each corner, I then tucked into the pins that I'd pinned into the ground. So without me even putting the tent up, it's now in place. Yeah. So when I put it up, even if it was windy, it's not going to blow away. Yeah. So that footprint thing was amazing. I didn't realise actually how good that was going to be. Right. The other good thing is it then protects your tent. So your tent's sitting on top of an extra protective layer. So it's less likely to get damaged.
That's called a ground sheet, isn't it? Is that right?
It's still a what, Dave?
Is it called a ground sheet?
It's called a footprint.
Footprint, is that what it is?
The bit that you set your tent on.
Okay.
Yeah. And my tent was perfect. I've got inner and outer layer, and with vents. And my sleeping bag was so hot, I just had my vents open all night. So that obviously would have kept the condensation down a bit as well. So no, absolutely no problem with my tent whatsoever. But again, it was brand new. You know, like that, those problems could come a few years down the line. You know.
Apart from you had a mouse in it at one point, but it was only on the outside bit, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I didn't actually know the mouse was there, but the 20 poos in the morning told me it was obviously there for quite a long time.
Okay, so in the end, let's summarise what happened. You took a month. You've been, I was going to say unemployed for a month, but we'll get to that. Possibly retired. And so I think I know how far you've gone, but let's hear it from your lips. How far did you go altogether on the bike with all that camping gear for almost all of it?
I had 1,298 miles.
That's what I reckon.
And it was a climb of 66,000 and something feet.
287. And by the way, I've worked out how high Ben Nevis is, from sea level. But see, when someone goes up Ben Nevis, it's not an honest mountain, right? An honest mountain is a mountain like Goat Fell and Arn, where you go from sea level to the very top. An honest mountain. So Ben Nevis is a dishonest mountain.
Yeah.
Because you're already part of the way up when you start it, right? But if we were being honest about it and starting at sea level, you still would have cycled up Ben Nevis every second day, and actually it's exactly 15 times you cycled up and down Ben Nevis in feet, 66,207 feet. But it'd be a lot more than 15 times if you were starting just from the bottom at Glen Nevis, kind of thing. So there we go. Okay. So next thing, how much did you were cycling and you were trying to raise money for the Multiple Sclerosis Society for research for that disease, and of course our mum had it, and it surprised you just how much, because you started off with a lowly target, and it was still a big target, but people really got on board and started putting money in, and you were surprised by that, weren't you?
Yeah, it's just been amazing. So I was worried that I'd set a target that was a bit too high of £1,000, and I think probably because it's a month-long task. I think that's probably why the donations ended up being a bit higher than I'd expected, because people are telling other people and that kind of thing. So word spreads rather than maybe a one-day event where only so many people will hear about it. So I aimed for £1,000, and I was a wee bit worried that I would be embarrassed that I wouldn't get anything like that. But anyway, it was surpassed that quite significantly, and I think it's 4,400 and something today, which is just amazing. And then of course there's the tax relief that also counts, so that takes it way over £5,000 that will be given to the MS Society. So that's a good significant amount of money. Amazing that people did that. Thank you everybody for that. That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
That will make a difference. That will make a difference to people.
And there's the thing, because that's the other thing you're taking from this, because you learned something about people's personalities in this trip, didn't you? Both from the size of the donations, the fact that they would just give you cash without even knowing you, and also put you up for the night.
Yeah.
Put you up for the night several times. How many offers have you had? I've lost count. I don't know how many. People were very, very nice, weren't they?
Yeah, they were incredibly kind. They taught me that I'm kind of almost ashamed of myself of how I'm just not as kind as the people that I met. Yeah. So that is something to be learned from that. I actually should have said that earlier on. What should I have learned from this trip? That's something to. And the other thing is how you kind of perceive people with fear, because everything we hear in the media is just normally so awful, and yet there are so many good people that are willing to help. Not one bad person did I come across. Not one bad person.
Yeah.
Nobody was mean. Nobody was horrible. The lady was telling me that it was her private land. I actually am not bothered about that at all. She wasn't threatening. She wasn't, not a bad person. did I meet?
Yeah, that's just a bit of
And
grumping.
that
That was nothing, that's just a wee bit of grumping.
it's faith, doesn't it? It makes you realise, wait a minute here, the world is not full of bad people, the world is full of good people.
Yes, okay. So that was a lesson. I learned that same lesson from actually Sally the Teenage Westie, because she was a dog that didn't have chances, and yet she was nothing but loving and kind, if you know what I mean, and excited and enthusiastic, and she had no badness in her, despite the fact that she really deserved to have some in her. So that was I had a lesson like that from a dog, but it's the same kind of thing, somebody, you meet somebody.
The other thing, Dave, is how many people were so kind to Sally the dog. They absolutely loved her.
Yeah, and she had no badness in
So
her.
you see other people's kindness that way as well.
Yeah, so you have to try and almost learn from that and try to reach the same kind of giddy heights as the example that you've just been set. That's it. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Okay, so you've completed it. You are a jogger. Have you got any more challenges? Because you've only just finished it, so you're probably not thinking about that. But roughly in your head, you loved it. So I actually do think that you should probably do something else like that.
Yeah, no, I am. So I am going to. I already know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So this time next year, so I'll do other cycles in between, but nothing like that. But this time next year, because the timing was so good for Scotland, midge-wise. That's next year, assuming it's not, I have to admit there's a proviso here. If I were to look at the weather forecast and it was horrendous weather, stormy, pouring with rain, I wouldn't do this. But I'm going to plan a route down as many of the islands off the west coast of Scotland as I can.
Yeah.
And I can just take my time. I could take 2 months, 3 months, or a month. I don't know. But I don't have to get from point A to point B. I don't have to get, there doesn't have to be a particular start or a particular finish. So I would like to, actually kind of, spend a few days on each island, and some of the bigger islands, maybe more than that, and kind of work my way around and actually get to learn about the islands. I think as well this time of year, it's not so busy. So that's quite good. A lot of people are put off the islands because they're concerned about getting on or getting off. So if I don't have a time frame, that would be, that's not a stress factor for me. Yeah. And of course, the cost of a car and a ferry, or many ferries, could be quite prohibitive. But a bicycle, that's not the case.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know exactly how many, but I would like to visit as many as I can.
Well, of course, I work for Caledonian McBrain, and I can tell you that, of course, they do the routes all right up the whole west coast. They just don't do the Orkney and Shetland. And but a bicycle is free, and all those routes are subsidised for foot passengers as well by the Scottish Government. So it really is very affordable. It's only £4 to get to Isle of Arran with a bicycle, £4.20. So you can make that a challenge, maybe to go to every single island that Calmac goes to, or something like that. All of them.
Yeah, I could do that. Yeah. And I think as well, having learned that one of the things that really, I mean, I would cycle along, right, and I would go like, oh my goodness, that's just so beautiful, right? I like, oh my goodness, that's just so lovely. You're looking at these views, they're stunning. But I did realise, as I said earlier, that when you bring water into it, it adds another level. Yeah. So I am going to go around islands. Clearly, I'm going to see a lot of water. So I think that will tie in very nicely with what seems to, make me feel very content and happy.
So, Mo, having finished all your adventures and cycled the length of Britain, who would you like to thank for making it possible, for inspiring you, for helping you along the way?
Well, there are quite a lot of people, of course. The first lot of people actually I'm going to thank, which maybe didn't make it possible for me to do the cycle, but certainly it was the major reason for the cycle are the people that have donated to MS Society. So it's sitting at £4,500, which is just phenomenally amazing. So that is fantastic. And of course, actually, in some ways you could say it definitely inspired me to continue, because once people started donating, I suddenly realised, I really have to do this now. So definitely that made a big difference from the point of view of making sure that I definitely finished. Apart from that, people I'd like to thank in connection with the actual cycle itself, people obviously that were kind enough to put me up in their homes. Virtually every person that put me up in the homes was a stranger, which is incredibly kind. It could have been friends of friends or people that I just met on the way, or friends of mine, in fact, that also did put me up. But yeah, that obviously was lovely to get a shower and a bed those nights. That was amazing. The people that helped me move myself from place to place. So what I mean by that is, for example, when I stayed with Sister Nikki, our sister Nikki, she I think drove 700 miles in total, dropping me at one place and picking me up at the other place. So that was massive. What was that, Dave?
Good grief! I mean, that's about 2/3 of the length of the cycle.
Exactly. So that's quite a good commitment. And then also, like my son Ben, he dropped me off one day with a bike. My friend Aileen picked me up another day with a bike. All that kind of stuff. So that was amazing. That made it much more pleasant for those parts, obviously. My friends that met me up at John O'Groats, Elizabeth and Jerry. That was an amazing thing for them to do as well, obviously, especially make that journey to be there for me going over the line. The people that gave me advice about stuff to take with me, of which there were quite a lot of people that input into that, but Karen and Ivor in particular were the main source of advice for me that helped me greatly. Other than that, nearly there. Jonathan, who helped me plan my route through the canal systems to make use of the showers and so on the canals, so that was really good. And obviously to cycle along the canals a bit more, so that was lovely. And lastly, I would say the people that made comments on Facebook, that was really encouraging for me. I was blown away by some people who made comments almost every day or every day, encouraging me, and really lovely, and that made a big difference as well. So yeah, I think that's thanking everybody. Obviously, brothers and sisters as well. That includes you being so encouraging. That made a big difference as well.
So when you're reading these comments, you're reading them last thing at night, like when you're in your tent, stuff like that, on your phone.
Actually, honestly, I read them quite a lot during the day. If I was stopping at one point, I'm like, I'll see if there are any more comments. So I mean, having been a zero Facebook user for many years, I must have gone onto Facebook about 6 times a day.
So so that's a change there, isn't it? You started to appreciate that kind of communication thing with the Facebook.
Yeah.
That's good. I did wonder, maybe the next challenge could be to be a joggler instead of a la jogger. Do it in reverse. Against the wind.
Oh, right. I thought you meant a juggler.
No,
right,
juggler.
Okay, I get
Juggle. John O'Groats Land End. And against the wind. But downhill the whole way. Downhill all the way.
Aye. I don't think so. I don't think I would do that. That doesn't appeal at all.
No.
Definitely not.
No.
Not doing it.
Okay. Well,
you do it, Dave?
Well, hopefully I will never attempt to run it. That's the main thing I've got to avoid. I don't want to be running it. I know people do, and but that would be quite frightening. I don't know how long that would take.
Yes.
If you survive.
I know.
Anyway, like that.
Well, knowing you would try and beat the fastest time.
Well,
so that wouldn't be good for you.
Well, yes, fastest old man. Okay, well that'll do fine then. It's been 30 years since your mum was around, but actually I know your mum would be proud of you for this. Okay. Right.
I know, yeah. Yeah. I had hoped the timing of the cycle actually would be last September, but it's exactly 30 years since she died kind of thing. But yeah. It's well, and I know the effort that she put in to try and help people with MS, so it's good to do something. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Look forward to your next adventures.
Okay, Dave. Take care.
Right, bye. Bye.
Bye.